About 150 kilometers southwest of Cairo, in a shallow basin of pale rock and gravel, there are whales lying on the surface of the desert. Not buried, exposed, ribs curving up out of the grit, vertebrae strung across 15 meters of open ground, in a place where the rain is a rumor, and the nearest coast is a day's business. The Egyptians call it Wadi al-Hitan, the Valley of the Whales, and the whales are not the strangest thing about that ground.
The skeletons at Wadi al-Hitan are roughly 40 million years old, and hundreds of them have been counted in that one basin. The largest belong to an animal called Basilosaurus isis, an early whale built like a serpent, with a pair of small, useless hind legs still attached halfway down its body, one of the last whales to have feet. The rock those bones lie in was the floor of a sea, the Tethys, a warm, shallow ocean that once ran right across the belt of country we now call North Africa and the Middle East. So the obvious conclusion is that the Sahara is simply an old seabed. The water left, the sand stayed. End of story. 40 million years of nothing. That conclusion is wrong. The sea did go. The desert did not follow it, not for tens of millions of years afterwards. Whatever made the Sahara arrived much later than the whales, and it did not arrive once.
For most of the 20th century, the standard answer was that the Sahara was young, 2, maybe 3 million years old, a side effect of the great ice ages taking hold in the north. Then the dates started sliding backwards. Working in northern Chad, geologists described fossil dune fields, wind-built and unmistakable, in sediments around 7 million years old. In 2014, a modeling study in Nature landed on the same date and offered a mechanism. The Tethys, the whale sea, was closing. As that body of water shrank, the moisture it had been feeding into the African monsoon shrank with it, and the interior of the continent began to dry out. 7 million years, not 3. That is now the leading estimate, and it is not unanimous, because reconstructing rainfall from 7 million years ago means reading chemistry out of mud cores and trusting a computer model to fill the silences between them. But something is plainly missing from that picture, because 5,000 years ago there were crocodiles in the middle of it.
On a sandstone plateau in southeastern Algeria, at Tassili Najer, there are more than 15,000 paintings and engravings worked into the rock. Cattle, whole herds of them, driven by figures carrying sticks. Elephants, giraffes, and hippopotamus, an animal that cannot survive an hour away from standing water. That plateau now receives almost no rain at all. Further east, in the Gilf Kabir, near where Egypt meets Libya, the Hungarian explorer Laszlo Almásy found a shallow overhang in 1933 with small human figures painted across its ceiling, arms thrown forward, legs trailing behind. He called it the Cave of Swimmers. Whether they are swimming is genuinely disputed. Some archaeologists read those postures as floating, or as spirits, or as a convention for the dead, rather than a picture of anybody in a lake. What is not disputed is everything lying on the ground nearby. Fish bones, harpoons carved from bone, freshwater mollusks, sitting in country where the nearest permanent water is now hundreds of kilometers in any direction.
Lake Chad today is a shallow, shrinking body of water on the borders of 4 countries. It used to be something else entirely. Beach ridges and abandoned shorelines trace an ancient lake, Mega Chad, which researchers estimate covered something over 350,000 square kilometers and stood around 170 meters deep. That would make it the largest freshwater lake on Earth. The figures are reconstructions, built from shorelines and satellite imagery, and they have been argued both up and down. And people lived on its edge. In 2000, a team of paleontologists hunting dinosaurs in Niger walked onto a dune called Gobero and found human bone weathering out of the sand. What they eventually excavated was a graveyard, around 200 burials, two distinct populations separated by roughly 1,000 years of abandonment, all of them laid down beside a lake that is no longer there. In one grave, a woman and two children were arranged facing each other, hands joined, on what the pollen suggests was a bed of flowers.
The cause is not weather, it is geometry. Earth does not sit upright and steady on its axis. It wobbles, slowly, like a spinning top losing its nerve, and one full wobble takes roughly 20,000 years. That wobble changes which season the planet is in when it swings closest to the sun. When northern summer lines up with that closest approach, North Africa takes noticeably more sunlight in July than it does today. The land heats harder, pressure drops. And the West African monsoon, which in our era stalls out over the Sahel and goes no further, is hauled hundreds of kilometers north into what is currently bare sand. Rain falls, grass comes. Grass darkens the ground, so the ground absorbs more heat, so more air rises, so more rain falls. The system pulls itself greener than the sunlight alone can account for. Then the wobble carries on turning, and the entire arrangement runs backwards. One team counted the signature of these episodes in sediment records around Africa. In the last 8 million years, they identified more than 230 of them.
So the Sahara is not a place that formed, it is a place that switches. The last switch is the one we can argue about with real data, and the argument is not settled. In 2000, a study of ocean sediment off the coast of Mauritania measured dust blowing out of Africa and found the change abrupt. In that core, the desert arrives within a few centuries, fast enough that a person could have watched it happen to their own country. Then, in 2008, a team drilled Lake Yoa in northern Chad, a lake still sitting there in hyper-arid ground, kept alive by fossil groundwater older than farming. They pulled up a continuous 6,000-year record from the land itself, and it showed no cliff. It showed a slope, gradual, running for thousands of years. Both records are good. They may simply be measuring different things, dust leaving versus vegetation dying, in different parts of a desert the size of the United States. And there is a third argument, harder to swallow.
That third argument says people helped. One researcher has proposed that the herders in those rock paintings and their cattle stripped enough ground cover to accelerate the collapse, tipping a system that was already leaning. It remains a minority position, and the direct evidence is thin, but it has not been ruled out either. Meanwhile, the dead lake is still working. The lowest point of the old Mega-Chad Basin is a place called the Baudelaire Depression, a floor of diatomite, which is the compressed skeletons of freshwater algae that lived and died in that water. Wind funnels between two mountain ranges and scours it. Satellite measurements suggest around 180 million tons of dust leaves North Africa each year, and roughly 28 million tons of it crosses the Atlantic and settles on the Amazon, carrying phosphorus the rainforest cannot otherwise replace. Those numbers come from satellite retrievals and carry wide error bars, but the shape of it holds. A dead African lake is fertilizing a living South American forest, and the wobble has not stopped.
The orbital arithmetic points to the next northern summer maximum somewhere on the order of 10,000 years out, with the enormous caveat that nobody knows how a warmed atmosphere will bend that signal. Everything on that ground is temporary, including the sand. The whales had their sea. The herders had their lake. The dunes have their turn now. There is more of this here, if you want it.